relatively flat, up about 100 points. Stocks trending a little bit up amid stimulus package hopes. The White House and Democrats in Congress are pushing forward with plans for a nearly $2 trillion stimulus package. Lawmakers could start voting on this as soon as next week. Both the Federal Reserve and the Biden administration have been.
So Republican lawmakers in the House are now pushing for permanent tax cuts. The Republicans have actually proposed several changes, everybody, that may negatively impact the economy. And the Federal Reserve has just announced its new plan to tackle inflation and the rising cost of necessities, including gas and groceries. More relief may actually be coming soon in the form of stimulus relief debit cards. And now, House Republicans on the Ways and Means Committee are also seeking to make the tax cuts and adjustments enacted in the 2017 overhaul of the tax system permanent. It's a move economists would say actually going to stimulate the economy, and at the same time, the Federal Reserve is trying to rein against a 40-year high inflation. But can it be done? Well, everybody wants to know. So, another measure proposed by representatives and senators is going to allow machinery costs to be written off as a tax deduction when they're purchased. So, economists say that cutting taxes and increasing the deficit at a time when President in-person assisted inflation needs to be tamed will only add to the fuel of price increases. Altogether, everybody, tax cuts in 2017 laws added $1 trillion in government debt through 2028. And when asked whether the cuts will add to inflation, and Republicans are working on opposition on this to help so many people across the state. So the governor, everybody, Janet Mills, approved the distribution of the checks in April, with the total cost of the stimulus payments estimated to be around $730 million. To qualify, applicants must have lived in the state for a full year and must have filed their taxes in 2021 by October 31st in order to receive the money. Eligible applicants must make less than $100,000 annually if filing individually, or $200,000 if filing jointly. That's all according to the governor's office. However, dependents are not eligible for the payments, and residents of Virginia only have a matter of days to file the necessary paperwork in order to claim the missing stimulus money. So be sure to act now and be sure to act quick in order to receive your stimulus checks. To the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, well, the Republicans said that economic conditions were improved by the moves in 2017. And data from the labor market released department earlier this week showed that inflation has remained above 8% for 7 months in a row. The Federal Reserve, in response, has raised the interest rates to slow economic activity and bring prices down. During a recent meeting, the Federal Reserve said that slower economic growth is specifically going to help inflation calm down. A study published by the San Francisco Federal Reserve found that current inflation is caused more by supply factors than demand factors. Analysts say that over a long span of time, some of the proposed tax cut extensions could be deflationary, but that the prospect of a recession may complicate those effects. Now, California, everybody, is already sending out millions of more money to millions of more people in the state. The payments which started going out in the last 7th of the last month range from $200 to $1,000 depending on income and other factors. About 18 million payments will be distributed over the next few months. That's benefiting up to 23 million Californians. The cash payouts are part of a June budget deal, and to be eligible, you need to have filed a 2020 tax return by October 15th. And there's an exception for people who did not file by the October deadline because they were waiting on individuals' tax and payer identification number. Unfortunately, everybody, people who didn't file taxes for 2020, including seniors and disabled people, were left out. People who can be claimed as dependents for tax purposes won't get their own payments either. The payments also won't go to married or domestic partners who have an adjusted gross income over $500,000. Some goes for individuals who have an AGI over $250,000. You have to be a California resident for at least 6 months of 2020 in order to receive the stimulus payment. Not only that, folks, but listen to this. Maine residents have 4 days to claim up to $850 in crisis relief due to a surplus in the state's budget. The stimulus payments also aim.
Putin's invasion of Ukraine sent gas prices soaring around the world. Because of actions we've taken dealing with the petroleum reserve and other things, prices are coming down here at home. They're now down $1.22 since their peak this summer. Folks, our economy continues to grow and add jobs even as gas prices continue to come down. But we got a lot more to do. But we also know folks are still struggling with inflation. It's our number one priority. That's why, with Mike's help and Scott's help, I signed the Inflation Reduction Act to bring down the cost of everyday things that we talk about around the kitchen table. My dad used to say everybody needs just a little breathing room. I come from a family like many of you do, good family, middle-class family. We weren't poor. My dad, we lived in a 3-bedroom split-level home in a development, 4 kids and a grandpop. and thin walls from my grandparents, my parents, but all kidding aside, everything that happened, was at the kitchen table. When the price of gas went up, we talked about it. It was a problem. It was a decision. But it's all, what are the bills people have to pay every month, a lot of people? Well, guess what?
But everybody, states like Alabama, Alaska, Hawaii, Maine, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, and many other states continue to provide additional SNAP payments worth at least $95 in July. The USDA has allowed some U.S. states to issue emergency allotments. The CalFresh program in California is one of the state's programs that issues monthly electronic benefits that can be used to buy most foods at many markets and food stores. CalFresh is for people with low income who meet federal income eligibility rules and want to add to their budget to put healthy and nutritious food on the table. Tens of millions of seniors depend on Social Security, and as inflation continues to surge, it's growing more challenging for many retirees to make ends meet. Early this year, Social Security beneficiaries received a 5.9% COLA, and this still account for how inflation rose in late 2021. Because costs have soared throughout 2022, next year's COLA will likely be even higher. At this point, it's unclear exactly how big the 2023 COLA will be. The final number will depend on what inflation looks like throughout the rest of 2022. Earlier this year, researchers from the Senior Citizens League estimated that the next year's COLA could be as high as 8.6%. But new research from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget suggests that it could be potentially as large as 10.8%, which would be the biggest cost of living adjustment since 1981. A nearly 11% raise would result in many retirees collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars more in benefits each month, while the increase would make it easier for them to afford the ever-increasing cost of goods and services. A higher COLA is not necessarily a good thing, and a higher COLA means that inflation is continuing to increase. Now, there are many more lawmakers in states and cities that have approved a new round of relief checks. Democrats and Republicans are finally reaching a deal on President Biden's agenda. This means a fourth stimulus check for Americans this year. Now, New Mexico and residents may have already received their first payments. Californians can look for their inflation relief checks as soon as October. This will be done to lessen the blow of rampant inflation and guard against the growing threat of a recession. An increasing number of states are sending money to residents in the form of tax rebates or inflation relief checks. One of the latest is South Carolina, where the governor signed legislation to send taxpayers tax refund checks by the end of 2022. Massachusetts could be next, where the state legislature hopes to send money by the end of September. The federal government issued 3-round stimulus checks during the crisis.
Standards. And fifth, we had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks. Finally, we discussed human rights and the need for political reform. As always, as I always do, I'm